You've heard the expression died and gone to heaven, and there are even some people who claim that it's happened to them for real. But what about those who died and didn't go to heaven? Well, today we are diving into the fiery depths of hell. Literally. Because I'm here to count down the top 10 people who saw hell and lived to tell about it. Starting us off at number 10 is Bill Wiese. In an event that he relates to a vision, lifelong devout Christian Bill Wiese saw the fiery depths of hell and has spent his entire life since trying to spread the word. He says the experience felt like falling down a long, dark, and dirty tunnel until finally he crash landed into a prison. The air was hot, intensely hot, so hot that it seemed like life couldn't even survive down here, just as he had always imagined. During Bill's time in hell, which lasted exactly 23 minutes, he was witness to a great number of horrors like torture, intense darkness, a raging pit of fire, blood-curdling screams, and the foulest odor he had ever smelt in his life. Then suddenly, as he recalls, there was a bright light and he felt himself rising out of the tunnel where he had previously descended. From that moment forward, he knew he had found his lifelong calling. He wrote a book called 23 Minutes in Hell, detailing his experience that he continues to share with everyone he meets. Next up at number 9, Sister Josefa Menendez. A nun for most of her life, Sister Josefa claims that she experienced hell on a number of occasions. Despite living out a devout life in pursuit of the Lord, Josefa claims that she was no stranger to the devil in her life and would frequently be visited by him, trying to get her to doubt her faith. She pushed back her entire life against him, but says she would often get visions of the dark depths she feared, where she saw people being tortured by demons around a large pit of fire. She would detail these visions in her journal, writing about how many she had witnessed fall in the fiery pits of hell and what the souls suffered while down there. Some suffered from shame, others from chastity or lack of faith, and said that no matter how hard she tried to describe the pain she saw, that no words could describe the horrors she witnessed. Coming in at number 8 is Jason Gapasin. After being declared dead for nearly 30 minutes, Jason says he was visited by Jesus, who brought him down to hell. Now, Jason had always been a Christian his whole life, and a devout one at that, so he was scared when he found himself in the place he had worked his whole life to stay away from. He says he asked Jesus why he was brought down here, to which the Lord replied that he was showing him hell so that when he went back to earth, he could tell people that it was true. In his time down there, he saw thousands of trapped souls crying in a way he had never seen on earth. It was a deep lack of hope, unlike anything he could describe in words. As he tells it, he turned to Jesus and asked why so many people were trapped in hell, begging for forgiveness. Why weren't they being forgiven? To which Jesus apparently told him that once you die, you no longer receive any mercy from God. Eventually, Jason was revived by God, as he believes, and lived to tell the tale of his visit to the underworld. Now listen, I only have one question about this. According to him, God told him he does not give mercy to the dead, but he was dead in his own story and received mercy. That's all I'm gonna say. Coming in at number 7 is Jennifer Perez. Unlike some of the others on this list, Jennifer claims to have been a witness to both heaven and hell. She recalls finding herself standing before God, ashamed of her lukewarmness towards Christianity throughout her life. She said she told God that although she had always claimed to be Christian, that she knew deep down she had never really devoted herself wholly. From there, she was banished, sentenced to hell, and as she tells it, she began falling through the ground where she stood until finally she felt an unbearable heat surrounding her. Once she arrived in the River Styx, she had an unquenchable thirst and smelled sulfur so intensely that it made her nostrils burn. She looked around, there were demons torturing humans all around her, and the screams were so loud they made her ears ring. Then in the blink of an eye, it was over. Her life was spared. She was back on Earth. Jennifer went on to share her story with the world, warning believers that their lukewarm faith could be just as dangerous as committing a sin. Next up at number 6 is Ian Mcormack. Like many, Ian Mcormack's haunting visit to the netherworld all started with with a near-death experience. Ian was stung by a deadly jellyfish while walking along the beach, and after it became clear that it was a very serious injury, he was taken to the hospital. But sadly, they didn't make it in time. Upon arriving with no pulse in sight, Ian was pronounced dead. He describes his brief encounter as more than just physical darkness, but that there was actually something else there. There was a cold and eerie feeling as if something or someone was looking at him. The devil, waiting for him to cross over to the other side, perhaps? But then, he was back. He had a pulse and he survived against all odds. According to Ian, it was God that saved him. He had been given an option to return to Earth or enter heaven, and he wished to return to Earth so that he could share his story with the world. Coming in at number 5 is Mathew Botssford. Unlike many others on this list, Mathew was far from a Christian when he had his life-altering run-in with hell. After being shot in the head, Mathew was rushed to the hospital, and in such bad condition, doctors decided to put him into a medically induced coma to save his life. The coma lasted 27 days, and in those 3.5 weeks, he believes he was stuck inside hell. Quote, "Utter blackness, incredible fear. I went to a place that I believe was hell. It was void of anything good, beyond anything any words could describe." He explains while stuck down there, he witnessed terrifying creatures he assumed to be demons, and a profound isolation, inexplicable in this realm of reality. After his coma, he awoke, haunted by how he had spent the last few weeks, and through his recovery gave his life over to God, afraid that what he had witnessed was the true and real hell. Coming in at number 4 is Mary Baxter. Similarly to Jennifer Perez, Mary claims to have experienced a journey in both heaven and hell. One night during her regular prayer routine, a blinding light entered her room. At first she was afraid. It was unlike anything she'd seen before, but she was immediately calmed when she realized that it was apparently Jesus Christ himself. According to Baxter, Jesus took her on a tour of hell for 3 hours every night for 10 days in a row. On these tours, she discovered that hell is physically located in the center of the earth, and claims that it's shaped like a human lying down. Maybe to symbolize the dead? I don't know, I'm not sure. But her most clear recollection was how hell was organized. Mary explained that in hell, everyone was grouped with people who had committed the same sins, thieves with thieves, etc. And that punishment varied based on sin. Each sin received different kinds of eternal torture. After the 10 days were up, she never saw it again, but she has never forgotten the horrors she witnessed. Coming in at number 3 is Reverend Kenneth Hagin. At the age of 15, Kenneth says he found himself in hell after a near-death experience resulting from a chronic heart condition. Allegedly, once Hagin's heart stopped beating, he began feeling overwhelmed by a numbing sensation expanding throughout his entire body, and recounts his experience as follows. Quote, "I began to descend down into a pit, like you'd go down into a well, cavern, or cave. And I continued to descend. I went down feet first. I could look up and see the lights of earth. They finally faded away. Darkness encompassed me round about. Darkness that is blacker than any light man has ever seen." Once down there, he recounted it was intensely hot, and that there were strange creatures surrounding him everywhere. He was so afraid, believing he was going to be trapped in this realm for all eternity, until all of a sudden he was back. Doctors were able to save him, and he survived his descent into hell. From that day forward, he committed his life to God and spreading his word, hoping to never again return. Coming in at number 2 is Tamara Laroux. At the age of 15, Tamara Laroux was incredibly depressed. Seeing no other way out of what she felt was hell, she attempted to take her own life. In a twist of fate she would have never predicted, Tamara felt her soul exit her physical body, and all of a sudden explains that there was an unstoppable speed, like she'd entered a time warp, except that everything around her was in complete darkness. All of a sudden, she saw this fiery pit in the distance and looked at the world around her before screaming in complete agony. She was in hell. She remembered seeing thousands of tortured souls around her, demons everywhere, yet a feeling of complete and utter isolation from it all. But just just as she began to lose all hope, thinking she was trapped in the dark pit of despair forever, a bright hand grabbed onto her and carried her up to heaven. Then all of a sudden, as if in the blink of an eye, she was back in her home and alive. Doctors described her survival as a complete miracle with no logical explanation, and she has spent the remainder of her life teaching people about her time in the darkness. And last up today in our number 1 spot is Howard Storm. Howard Storm was a strict atheist. He never believed a thing such as hell existed in the first place, let alone that he of all people would have any kind of divine experience in a celestial plane. That was until the day he began to feel excruciating abdominal pain. After being evaluated at the hospital, it was discovered he had a perforation in his colon and required immediate surgery. While waiting for the surgery, writhing in pain, Howard passed out, only to be woken up existing outside of his body. He looked down and saw his wife crying over him. Then, out of the darkness, he heard his name. So he followed the sound. He was led down a hallway by pale, humanoid-looking creatures that kept saying, "We've been waiting for you." At this point, Howard is freaking out. Were these demons taking him to hell, he thought? How was that even possible? He began to resist following them, and he claims that at that moment the creatures attacked him, scratching and biting him all over. But at the very same time, he heard another voice saying to pray to God. He noticed at the mere mention of God that the creatures retracted, so he repeated it until they left him alone for good. He called out into the abyss for Jesus, asking to be saved and put back inside his body, and the next thing he knew, he awoke and found himself being prepped for surgery. Howard believes that God saved him that day, and from that day forward he was no longer an atheist, he even became a minister. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you know of any other crazy stories of people that claim to have been to hell, make sure to leave them in the comments below, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.